Welcome everyone to today's Friday Forum. We have a very distinguished panel for you today that we have a change to announce, and I'll get to that in a second. My name is Casey Emlin. I am an Associate Director here at the Y, and it's my pleasure to work with the Friday Forum Committee in planning these lectures. This is the second semester in a year-long series looking at breaking down racism, and we are really excited to have folks who are going to talk about how they're fighting racial injustice locally with us today. I'd invite you to take a look at the series brochures on your seats or on the tables in front of you for additional information about the series. Of course, next week we are hosting one of the Black Lives Matter founders at the national level, Opal Tometi, and we will be over at Allen Hall for that talk so that we can accommodate more people in this room pool. So again, next week we will be at Allen Hall in the main lounge. So if you want to come to that talk, make sure that you head over that way and not here. We'd like to thank all of our series co-sponsors for financially supporting this program. You can find a full list of sponsors on our website. It is constantly being updated, and all of those organizations are awesome, so you should take a minute to check that out. Sign language interpreters are available for any speaker in this series if the Y is contacted with a few days' notice. If you have questions about that, please inquire at the front desk. Friday Forum is rebroadcast on WEP 90.1 Community Radio and Urbana Public Television. And in today's case, we are live streaming it. We are not live streaming next week. We are not allowed to record, so if you want to see it, you have to come in person. So just a heads up. For this particular presentation, we will take questions using this remote microphone throughout the entirety of the panel. So if you have a question, just raise your hand and I will come to you. When you were speaking in the microphone, we've got it turned all the way up, but make sure that you hold it a little close to your face so we can hear you and so the panelists can get your questions. If you need to leave at any time during the presentation, please feel free to discreetly slip out. If you're a student who's here for class or another kind of credit, make sure that you sign in. And with that, I get to introduce to you today's panelists. Our first panelist is Evelyn Reynolds. She is an associate professor of sociology at Parkland College. She graduated with a Master's of Science degree in sociology from Illinois State University and went on to teach at Illinois State University, Heartland Community College, and the Illinois Central College before joining Parkland College in 2010. She recently founded the Black Lives Matter Champaign-Urbana chapter, which is part of the national organization. She's also a member of the organization Build Programs Not Jails, which has been working in opposition to the construction of new jails in Champaign County. Please join me in welcoming Evelyn. Also with us today is Marlon Mitchell, a PhD student in the University of Illinois College of Education Department, where his research interests include issues of diversity, inclusion, opportunity, and access. He looks at the intersection of education and community activism, and that is why he has helped found, a not-for-profit re-entry program called First Followers, being a native of Champaign and recognizing the challenges of his community. Marlon, along with a group of volunteer mentors, passionately aspire to make a difference in the lives of those who have been just as involved. Join me in welcoming And we unfortunately are not joined by Aaron Evans today. He's not feeling great, but he has provided for us an ample replacement, we believe. And so we're very excited to be joined today by Representative Carol Ammons. Representative Carol Ammons is currently serving her first term as a full-time state representative of the 103rd District, which includes Champaign-Urbana. Ammons is a grassroots community organizer for equality in education, media, technology, access, civil rights, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And prior to being elected as the first African-American woman to serve as our state representative and the highest level elected African-American woman in this area ever, she was on the Champaign County Board. She served as an Urbana City Council alderwoman and was involved in a wide range of community organizations, including Courage Connection, Urbana Champaign Independent Media Center, Don Moyer's Boys and Girls Club, Salvation Army Food Pantry, and I was excited, it was listed on your website, University YMCA. So we are very excited to have her, of course, because she's filling in, she does have to slip out at once. So if you have questions that are particular to Representative Ammons, you might want to ask them right away. And with that, we will begin our panel discussion. So just to get us started, I've asked each of the panelists to take a couple of minutes to sort of summarize for us the work that they're currently engaged in. And I suppose you can pick who starts, but maybe it makes sense to start with that one.
Well, first of all, really happy and grateful to be here at the Friday Forum. I've attended on a few different occasions and seen some really amazing speakers here. And I'm also grateful to the YMCA for this series that they put on that is very important. And I'm honored to be here with some fellow community activists who inspire me deeply to do better and to continue the work that I'm doing. So first and foremost, I moved to Champaign, Urbana, almost 6 years ago from Bloomington, Illinois, so right down the road, coming from ISU. And I moved here to teach at Parkland College. I'm a sociology professor, and for a long time I kind of justified not being involved community-wide as far as community activism, because I said, okay, I teach sociology, this is activism, and I do think of sociology as activism, since it is a discipline that essentially deconstructs society and highlights social issues, and that was all good and fine, but for several years I felt like something was missing, and I was really happy to hear about and kind of be a part of the Black Lives Matter movement as that kind of started taking off in 2012. And when I found out that there was multiple chapters of the Black Lives Matter organization, I knew that we needed something like that here. And that was actually a gap that I felt existed in this community, which is a very vibrant community with so many different activist groups, which I think is pretty unique when you think about other communities in the Midwest and in this area in particular. And so, a little less than 6 months ago, we formed the Black Lives Matter Champaign-Urbana chapter. So we are a very new infant chapter organization, but we've done a lot in that short amount of time. We've learned a lot, and there's certainly more to come.
First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out. I'd like to thank Casey and her crew for providing the space and the invite. I'm very honored to be here. Carol and I go back quite a ways. Her and her husband Aaron, he and I were boyhood friends. So I'm also welcome you to the community. I've been here all my life. I went through the education system here, and I'm an academic. So one of the things that I've been able to accomplish in my time, not only in Champaign, but as my time in school, higher ed in this case, was I've been able to get a bachelor's degree in engineering and in computer science. So after graduating from Dominican University, and then also have a degree from Carbondale, SIU in Carbondale, but I say all that to say, when I moved back to the community, I spent maybe 10 years out in the field of engineering, and coming back to the community, I just really start to see this thing about mass incarceration and boyhood friends and family members and different things like that being affected by this cycle of mass incarceration. So, being an academic, I kind of use my academic and my background as a platform to figure out what could I do to make a difference. So, what I did was 2012, I decided to go back to school, which brought me here to the University of Illinois. I grabbed my master's degree, rolled over into my PhD program. But along my journey here, I've been able to really dig deeper into not only the community roots, but also what it means from an academic standpoint, this view or this vantage point of mass incarceration. So one of the things I wanted to do with the skill set that I had was to kind of tackle it and make a difference in a way where I started a not-for-profit called First Followers. We'll be having our first year anniversary, so we opened the doors to the not-for-profit last year about this time in March. So one of the things, we all know that the landscape is shifting as far as policy. As policy, from a policy standpoint, it's starting to shift a little bit. So one of my interests right now, and it ties into why I created First Followers, is because people are returning home as we speak. There's 450 people that have been formerly incarcerated in Champaign County as we speak. Annually, there's about 400 to 500 individuals that return from incarceration. And one of the questions that I have, or guiding questions that I do have is, where are they going? What are they doing? How are we servicing them? So with that being said, over the year, James Kilgore and I have co-directed First Followers, and we're trying to dig deeper into this context. And one of the things, as we invite people into our drop-in center, we formalized our project in a mentoring-based model, which we try to build hope. Try to give hope to the hopeless, because there are not very many opportunities out there, as we all know, because of the social stigma that follows people that have been formerly incarcerated. So those are the type of things that we are doing at First Followers. We have a drop-in center where we open our doors 2 days a week, and over the past year, we've been able to serve 60 to 65 people. Many of them come in with very little education and very little work experience. So what we've been able to understand is that everybody, well, pretty much everybody that has come through our doors need employment. And so we kind of help with that piece. In this age of technology, we all know that how fast-paced it is. Many people that have been away, incarcerated 2 to 3 years, 4 to 5 years, 5, 10, or what have you. Technology moves by so fast and so swiftly that a lot of them do not know how a computer works, or email, or text messaging, smartphones, and different things like that. So our mentoring-based model, we have about 4 or 5 volunteers that come on an annual basis, on a routine basis, kind of sit down with our clientele and kind of go over certain things with the computer and just educate them on filling out application, online application. So that's one of the major components that we do offer. Also, persons who return home, they don't have just the basic necessities as far as a state ID or a driver's license. And we all know in order to have any sort of employment, you need that first and foremost. A lot of them have been away, they may have lost contact with family, they may not have their birth certificates, social security cards, and different things like that. So those are services, those are basic services that we can offer with our time and our knowledge of how to go about going out and getting those things. So, and another key component is trying to re-engage those individuals with family that they have lost or they have left behind once they were incarcerated. So this is another component of the project that we're running or that we're working at, and we're just trying to build momentum as we go into this year.
Thank you. Thank you. I know I need to apologize that I disappointed you. I know you came to see Aaron Ammons, and he is not feeling well. He blames me for it, passing on last week's sickness to him. To Evelyn and to Marlon, thank you all for letting me sit in and join you all for this discussion. My name is Carol Ammons. I'm the state representative for Champaign-Urbana. I have been, I'll just tell you just a little bit for those who may not know. My husband and I, Aaron, I've been in this community now about 17, 18 years. My husband grew up here, and I was very engaged. I came from Chicago, and I was very engaged in the political system in Chicago, and knew at that time that I would be serving the South Side, the Inglewood community is where I thought I would run for alderwoman to help that community in my 20s. And as God would have it, he would relocate me here because my mother lived in Rantoul. And I came and met Aaron Ammons, who had, as Marlon said, came through the entire system, educated, smart young man, caught up in the streets, had to walk through that road in order to get his life back on track so he can be the servant that he really should be for his community. And I met him after he had changed his life but didn't know what to do with it. So I said, how about this? Let's serve the community together. And that's what we've been doing for the last 16 years. We started CU Citizens for Peace and Justice as our first civic engagement project, of which many folks in this audience, we've worked together over a decade at least, around social justice issues, around criminal justice reform, around racial justice issues, environmental issues, are the 3 pillars of CU Citizens for Peace and Justice. And from that work, we knew that we were missing something. We really needed a political arm of that work. And so out of that work, we decided that we would have a political focus for CUCPJ because everything that we wanted to do tied into some political body, and we didn't have a spokesperson in that body. And so in 2007, I was appointed to the county board, Champaign County Board, And in 2008, I ran for the office myself, went in the office and began to work not only merging our activism, because I believe that I'm an activist politician, not the standard. I believe in the revolution of political process. And so merging those two things together, we worked on some really progressive changes at the county level until I moved to the city and ultimately moved to the state. Out of that, we've decided that the important thing of the work of the activist politician, and I think I'm recruiting others in this vein, the activist politician has to continue to engage the community members around the political issues of the day. And so out of my office, we've set up panels to do that, where many people, again, in this room, work with us around drafting legislation, around protecting our interests against legislation that is not in our best interest as a state, around proposing new ideas that could take us further to have the society that we want. And so we spend all of our time really contemplating these very important issues, the social issues of the day, the political issues of the day, and then trying to translate that into policy at the state level. And so I'm happy to be joining you all today. Unfortunately, I only have a short period of time, so I'm going to cut off my comment, but will say that if you're interested in contacting me, I didn't bring my cards, but I'm glad that Casey had some of our brochures, which my contact information is on this table, and you can certainly take it and call us later. We're interested in what you're interested in. And with that, I'll just stop so that we can kind of get into the questions of the day. Thank you.
And I have questions, I'll make this happen, but really at any point in time, if you have a question, please raise your hand, I'm happy to bring you the mic. My first question for you all is, obviously this series is motivated by a lot of what we're seeing in the national news. That's part of why we're doing this series, right? Whether it's shooting of unarmed Black folks, whether it's just systemic discrimination across the board. Our national news is really focused on racial injustice in the U.S. What parallels do you see locally with the things that people are hearing about nationally?
So I'll just start that. I'm glad that the focus is really revealing that which Black communities have known for a long time and have experienced for a long time. Sometimes it's difficult for us to share our experiences in story manner where people would believe that these things are taking place. But technology has changed the conversation in a way that now you can see that these things are taking place, and it's very difficult to ignore the obvious. The national media has, for its own reasons, shown the stories to the world of what's going on, but hasn't played a responsible role in relationship to holding people accountable, i.e. Flint. And so if we think about how we want to talk about the local and the national level, I continue to remind many of my colleagues that what's happening in Baltimore is not exclusive to Baltimore. What's happening in Chicago is not exclusive to Chicago. It's a construct that you actually have to work to deconstruct, and we're not doing that as quickly as we really should in order to save people's lives. And so for me, I've seen in the last few weeks additional assaults that are not necessarily shootings by an officer to a civilian, but they're assaults in the manner of public policy that ignores the needs of low-income communities that were structured a certain way, that ignores the needs of job creation for youth who are at over 50% unemployment, which feeds directly into the violence that you see in communities across this country. And the ignoring of those things produces a certain result. And what the media has done is said, well, we should, especially in the political climate that we're in currently, we have an anger that's happening, but the anger is being directed at the people who are the victims, unfortunately, instead of the people who created the construct that we're looking at. And I think that is what we need to actually change, and that's what we see locally. We see it state level, we also see it nationally.
One of the parallels that I see pretty clearly, you know, with what's going on nationally, what's going on locally, even though there's many it's all America, is mass incarceration. And I'm sure Melvin can speak to this a little bit more if you wanted to, but I think that's one thing that's been kind of striking to me at the local level. My first community involvement here in town was going to the Citizens for Peace and Justice meetings, and even more so with bill programs, not jails, and just learning about, you know, the racial disparities in the county jail here, and learning about the municipal offenses and the disparities in traffic stops and noise ordinances and, you know, citations and all these different things, bail and all these different issues that have really been startling to me at the local level. So I think that that's something, you know, that definitely stands out to me and resonates more now that you can see kind of, you know, just kind of be able to see this system in operation, you know, how there are these, you know, laws and policies in place at the national level, and the states kind of have to do their own thing. But just to be able to see how that plays out in your local community has really been interesting for me. But also kind of thinking of ways that you can address that at the local level, because nationally it just feels very overwhelming when we think of, okay, there's over 2 million people in jail or prison. It's definitely overwhelming. But it's been nice to kind of figure out ways that we can address that locally, you know, by you know, approaching the county board and the city council and all these other kind of political entities in town, and doing research, gathering research, meeting with and gathering stories from those, you know, formerly incarcerated, programs like First Followers, all those sorts of things at the local level are we're able to achieve, you know, some sense of you know, progress, or some sense of maybe making this problem a little bit better when it seems so overwhelming at the national level.
So for me, the parallel would be, once again, the mass incarceration piece. I mean, and Carol touched on this, these things are not isolated. We felt them, we've been feeling them for a long time. There's been generation after generation of this, and what really behooves me is the fact that over time, it took a presidential change in politics to really bring the awareness. And what I mean by that, it took for Obama to start really speaking up as far as from a political realm to change some of these over-sentencing guidelines, some of these things about profiling and all these different things that we hear in the media. These are things that me, myself personally here in Champaign have been feeling for quite a long time. I have several immediate family members that are incarcerated, that are still won't be home for another 10 to 15 years. So these are things that I've personally been feeling. It's just not one of those things where I watch CNN News and then I can understand it. No, this is something that I've been feeling for decades. But what really, just backing up a little bit, and we talk about the political climate, just the state of California maybe a decade ago of how they over-incarcerated people in such a manner where there had to be a federal injunction to release individuals. The state of California was going broke or went broke because of mass incarceration. They were locking up more or incarcerating more people than they can handle. So with that being said, now we see that it's on our home front here in the state of Illinois. With Governor Rauner, he just put out a report maybe about a month ago. When he got in office last year, he talked about releasing or decreasing the decreasing the Department of Correction by 25% before 2025. So I'm still scratching my head trying to figure out how that is going to happen when we're in a situation where we're financially broke, but at the same time he's cutting services and programs. Like I said, over 90% of the people that are incarcerated, as a matter of fact, there's 48,000 individuals that are incarcerated in the state of Illinois. 2 to 3% are coming from Champaign. Over 95% of those persons are going to return. So without the services that we see all these cuts, even here in that higher ed, you see that. But on service level, all these cuts that are happening today and hasn't been happening since he's been in office, what is he going to do, or how is that going to look is the question once these individuals return home. So that's one of the things that kind of motivated me to try to get that wheel spinning, try to be a little bit proactive because it's coming, it's going to happen. And like I said, there's over 400 or 500 individuals that are on parole right now. Right on that subject, the Danville Area College was pulled out of the state prison over there. They were doing the lower level associate's degree, leaving more for the education policy, education justice project to do. And you just mentioned Ron making noises about cutting recidivism, cutting the overall rate. Is there any chance, Carol, that can be turned around? Because we have these volunteers that are teaching, but Danville is pulling out. And it's, in the context of Ron apparently wanting to close the college, either Eastern or Western, I'm not sure. But is there any chance that kind of line item for education in prisons can be turned around?
I think that I did and read the report that was released from the governor's office or his task force. I don't think the report is aggressive enough to really address the incarceration rate in Illinois, and to reduce it by 2025 is not aggressive enough to do that. Because in order to really address that, you have to have education right inside, because they're coming home. And without them having some level of education, it's going to be very difficult for them to get employment and to move on, either through education or employment. The current climate in Illinois does not lend to what we know we really need to do to address mass incarceration. The climate does not lend to that. I did a bill review before I came here a few minutes ago, and on any given day, there's a new bill to deny a formerly incarcerated person some other right. Every session, there's at least 5 or 6 new bills in judiciary to extend sentences. So clearly there's some breaking discussion between the governor and the Republican colleagues in the General Assembly, because if you're trying to reduce mass incarceration, certainly you don't want to extend sentencing for people who are incarcerated. So it doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Those things don't go together. It is important for the people of Illinois to make the governor aware of our priorities. He has to be pressured. The reason why he rolled back, didn't restore, but rolled back the cuts on child care is because the pressure started hitting the reps very hard. The Democrats voted yes each time, and I don't want to turn this into a Democrat-Republican, but this is a very important point. If you really are serious about reducing mass incarceration, then the pressure has to come up against those legislators who are promoting things that extends it, that denies people their right to reentry, that does not fund education, right? This is how you are going to have to address that. And unfortunately, at this time, the people who are supporting those kind of bills are in the Republican Party. That's the reality. And we have to pressure them to really look at the big picture for the rest of the state, because we end up picking up the tab. Instead of having them in community services that are cheaper, and they know it's cheaper, drug treatment is cheaper than incarceration, we have them incarcerated for long, extended periods of time. And that has to be changed or switched in order for us to address education in Danville. I spoke in Danville a month ago, and I was thoroughly impressed, not surprised, but impressed with the level of understanding and education of the inmates that were inside of Danville at the time. They understand what's going on, and they can articulate it legislatively, what needs to be changed. They understood. What doesn't translate is when you get into the political arena. Too soft on crime, those crazy ads, Carol is gonna not keep your community safe if she votes for this. That kind of stuff needs to change, and I'm glad that the national level is really highlighting the corrupt system that exists around these things.
I've heard a lot of talk about the school to prison pipeline, and we nationally, it's difficult to do anything. Even within the statewide, it's difficult to do anything, but within Unit 4 and Unit 116, We have less than 13% of the population in Champaign County is African American. And yet 75% of the expulsions in the Champaign School District are black kids. 65% within the Urbana School District. 77% of all expulsions are Champaign. 85% of all expulsions in Urbana are black kids. How do we begin to address this? Marion, you touched on that. Most of a big percentage of the people coming out of prison don't have a good education to begin with. How do we break the school to prison pipeline locally? Forget about the state, nationally, but we can really influence Unit 4 and 116. What do we need to do to break the pipeline?
Well, it's ironic that you brought that up because I think it was last night I had a conversation about the way the Unit 4 school system, and I went through the Unit 4 school system, is set up. Historically, it has always been one where they've had their challenges with diversity and equity. 2002, there was a federal law called the Consent Decree from 2002 to 2009. One of the things, the reason it was resolved is because the Unit 4 school district decided and they agreed upon that they would do things that would kind of dispel some of that notion about diversity and equity. The figures that you're reading right now are true. They're right there in our face. I also read a report that was given, I think it was a 2012 or maybe 2014 report from the University of UCLA's Civil Rights Law Group. Champaign actually, true story, Champaign School District was the worst in the nation as far as the disparity between black students and white students. So these are things that we look at on the surface level. You look at it, and I mentioned the consent decree because this is something that we're supposed to be building on, but somehow, somewhere we're falling behind. We've had this whole referendum thing about building a new central high school. So all of these things are caught up in this political web versus us as parents, us as community members coming together and really resolving these things. A lot of these challenges are historical. And history, actually I grew up here, I went through school system, so I know what it's about. I'm one of the few that have made it through, but me as a parent, I give back. And so it's gonna take a grassroots effort to really change these things, but without that, it's just gonna be more lip service, more political agendas, and a lot of the different things that we've been seeing over the last 20 or 30 years.
If I could also comment on the school to prison pipeline, I think there's a lot going on there, but I think a lot of the issues in schools are cultural issues, kind of ingrained racism, basically. So I think there's this active kind of suppression of black expression. And I'm sure most people have seen the video of the South Carolina student pulled out of her chair by the police school officer because she gave him a dirty look or she was loud or something like that. And those are the kind of things that black children get in trouble for all the time, every day at school. My daughter's in kindergarten now, this is her second semester in kindergarten. And so I'm kind of starting to see a little bit firsthand, since I'm so far removed from that system, the dealings of the classroom environment. It's really interesting to see the treatment of black students compared to other students. And it is things like, black students being perceived as loud. And maybe black students some black people do talk a little bit louder than others. And that's okay, but that's not something that's familiar to many white teachers that they tend to have. And sometimes it's, looks and it's slang and it's clothing and things like that that agitate some school teachers and officials. And there's also this overarching impression of this kind of aggression and hostility about black people, and it trickles down to black youth. I think that black youth are not perceived as childlike as white youth. There's many studies about this as well. And so I think that those are issues that can be addressed pretty easily, actually, at the local level, with those, with communications with the school board, going in and meeting with principals and teachers having trainings, having workshops, having conferences. There's actually a lot of discussion right now going on with a lot of the Unifor schools, high schools, and middle schools about having training like this to talk about some of these disparities in the classroom. So I think there's hope there in that case.
I have to chime in as a mother. I have a son who's in 8th grade at a middle school. And my husband and I asked Amir, I said, what is the peer pressure what do you get as far as peer pressure at school? And he said, well, some of the children are, they're always fighting, he says, or he said, to do drugs. And I said, oh, interesting. He said, oh, and yes, sex. And I said, well, we expected that one, right? And I said to him, I said, well, how do you respond to it? Obviously, he's a good kid. He says, well, I try to keep the children from fighting. And I said, what are they fighting over? I don't know what they're fighting over. He doesn't know what they're fighting over, yet they're fighting all the time. And usually, he said, it's girls more than boys. And I said, oh, okay. There is a social framework for which children come to school. They come out of homes that have low wages, in many cases. Mom is working more than one job, and it's usually a single parent or a paramour involved. Maybe their father is incarcerated because there's some other systemic issues going on. Children are angry for different reasons that they cannot interpret. And then they go to school, and the schools expect them to act as if everything's okay. Many of them are homeless, and we don't realize that. They don't have a place to go. I spoke to a teenage mom yesterday in Springfield, and she's in a homeless program in Chicago, and she had a little baby with her. She's 21 years old this year, and the baby's 6 months, I believe. She just turned 21. Has no family. She's in this program that's about to be cut because the governor refused to just deal with the budget, but nonetheless, I spoke to her and I asked her if she had any support system, and she said none. She said her mother is on drugs and she had all these issues, and she said if this program closes, she has nowhere to go with this baby. Nowhere to go. So just imagine she's going to raise this baby wherever she can, however she can. And this baby's going to go to school. And this baby's going to see the little girl next to her, and she's going to say, well, Mom, she has a pretty dress on. Why don't I have one? She has a nice book bag. Why don't I have a book bag? And we don't realize that children are internalizing these images and psychological traumas that they cannot give back to you in words. And they act them out against each other because they're peers. They know they can't act them out with the teacher, so they act them out with their peers. And the drugs that's in the home, they can't tell everybody that that's what's going on because it's illegal. So you have all of this construct that these children are going into the school every day with, and then you have people in the school who are not trained to deal with that. So what is our response? Just put an officer there, he'll deal with it. You get out of hand, we'll arrest him, school, right? That is the mainframe for which most people think that the solution is always going to be the power structure. The person who's in between me, the civilized, and him or her, the uncivilized. Let's put this person there and they'll deal with it. Instead of looking at the median income of African American families and say, why is it only $11,000? And the median income for Caucasian families is 16 times that? How can we fix that so that this child can have a book bag or a decent pair of shoes? We ignore it completely and wonder why they act out in school. That is actually the school-to-prison pipeline. It's an economic system that keeps certain people in certain class structures and others aren't. And so you don't have the same dynamics. And they do come out, and they do commit crimes. But what is the root cause of this? And until we really deal with root cause analysis, we are going to continue to look at them as bad people, good people, bad people, poor people, rich people, These kind of things is what actually creates the dynamics of Ferguson, the dynamics of Chicago. People can't live like that, and they get tired. and their only way to lash out is like Watts. And that's gonna happen. The more and more injustice that's in the system, we have to address that.
Question. I grew up in the turbulent 60s. I've been organizing, community organizing for 50 years now. I'm board president of National People's Action. I think everybody can hear me. I've been organizing for 50 years. Right now I'm board president of National People's Action. I recognize the fact that Black Lives Matter is more than just a local organization. It is connected on a national basis. Our organization has been integrally involved with Black Lives Matter for quite some time. We're merging right now from one organization into 3, where we will be in 30 states. We're expanding our base, where we're organizing and we're informing the communities in terms of things that we can do. When we look back at the 60s, I wonder if we have reimagined a different world. Has that narrative changed from the 60s? Are we going back and we're doing a repeat of what should have been done? And as far as education is concerned, what's going on in the classrooms are criminal. Classroom management. As a teacher myself, I understand that classroom management is very responsible for what goes on in the classroom. Education is not the reason. That teachers have to be more educated in terms of those cultural differences, Carol, that you've been talking about. And looking at those cultural differences, oftentimes we have others attempting to define what is wrong with me because they don't understand me. If we look back at Maulana Karenga with the 7 principles of blackness within Guru Saba, the 3rd one was Kuji Chagalia, to define myself, speak for myself, instead of being spoken for by others. And oftentimes we have others speaking for us but don't understand the pain, and oftentimes it has been indicated by what you said, those who are affected, they are unable to articulate that pain. How do you see the narrative have changed from the 60s into terms of where we are right now, considering everything that we have been doing and are still doing?
I think the narrative is starting to do the circular motion. As a student of the nonviolent movement, I've studied it, I've traveled in relationship to it, I've studied with many of the foot soldiers of the movement so that I could understand what was happening. I see a resurgence of the need for us to recapture the idea of civil rights in terms of human rights perspectives. We have mass incarceration in a way that is unprecedented in the world. Unprecedented. And it requires us to respond as a nation. We have a level of injustice in schools that is unprecedented. We have actually segregated schools and communities in a way that we worked, and you worked, not I, but you worked in the 60s to try to eliminate that and to get rid of that. But we see a resurgence of ideals that promote the separation of people as opposed to the unification and the humanitarian rights of all people. And I believe that's what we should actually fight against. Some people believe that, my opposition to the governor is because he's a Republican. It actually isn't. My opposition to the governor is because he's an ideologue. And he has a resurgence of ideas that reflect a time gone by. And we have to be careful not to buy the idea that it's okay for the 1% to make money off of the poor. That it's okay for us to have private prisons and privatized services in our public institutions. That creates the level of injustice that we see happening and resurging. And so the ideologues are really who we're fighting against. The ideologues, not the persons, but their ideas that are very dangerous, and they repeat a period of time that has already passed, but we've not cut the snake off at its root. And it is repeating because If you remember the union movements, I'm hoping you guys do, in the union movement, initially the white laborer and the black laborer were working together. And they built that movement together for just wages, just working conditions, safety issues. And that was important for those two, the poor white, the poor black, Latinos, to work together to build a union movement. But then the populace of the power structure came in and separated them based on skin color and said, you guys can build your trade union over here and we'll keep them in a service union. And that still exists today. And we're battling these ideas right now at the state level to address this. And so if we allow the ideologues to take us back to the 1960s, 1950s kind of policies, you will see the unrest grow in the country, and you'll see more violence in a way that we've not experienced it before, because people know no other way when you won't hear me than to use or lash out. And we learned this in American history, that America didn't come to be through peaceful means. And so we also know that that will be repeated. The more injustice people feel, the more you'll repeat those movements, and the civil rights movement don't have a hold today that it had yesterday. The Black Lives Matter people are not talking about let's have a nonviolent movement. There may be a moment when they're saying, no, nonviolence doesn't work anymore. Young people believe nonviolence don't work anymore. I don't know if that's true or not true. The reality is that people will get increasingly frustrated by the ideologues who are saying things like send 11 million Mexicans back over there and, you know, put these black people in prison, let's privatize those. I mean, this stuff that's going on and feeding the minds of people is actually what we're actually fighting against.
50 years ago this year, the Urbana schools integrated, the first in the state of Illinois. All of the main players are still alive except for the board members. Now, I looked in the paper today, this racial justice task force, 18 months to come up with what we already know. It doesn't take all day. And then I'm looking at the issue today in the paper, the microphone. 50 years ago, we didn't have the microphone. I'm looking at the few, and it's unfortunate that there's very few young people in this room. They will tell you, it doesn't take all day. Let's have 3 meetings, and then let's put action. I heard what you said, Marlon, all this lip service, it's time for action now. So, in reference to this lady over here, where she's saying, what can we do? 50 years ago, they didn't just integrate the schools and leave the kids in there. They walked the halls, they checked on the classrooms, they made sure they didn't have the education, because a lot of them didn't have the education to help their kids. They got people from the university, because they were all connected to university, to help their young people with what they didn't have in the schools. So can you at least encourage the young people here that it doesn't take 18 months to come up with, because I'm looking at the task force for Urbana. After 1 year, and all of the people that were chosen for the task force weren't at every meeting. So that, number one, should tell you it doesn't take a year. People are doing other things, not just that task force. So what can you say to the young people to encourage them that we're not wasting time by having all these different organizations? I know, Ms. Evelyn, you said that you were amazed at all the different activism groups here. Is that all necessary? Can we all work together somehow? Pull our resources together and make this work. It doesn't take forever. And all these meetings where everyone's not coming to the meeting, only to come down to, we have racial disparities. We know that. What is the solution? Like when I leave out of here, we have young people in here, we have a high school student in here. What can we do as we leave out to help change this? No talking, just some action. Because faith without works and action is dead.
But I think that's what, we're all part of various groups in the community. I think that's the first place to start, is to join a community group, go to meetings. That's what I did. I was educated, extremely educated by attending meetings, becoming a member. And so I think that's a first step. But I did want to also talk about, kind of social movements over time. And so with every social movement, there are stages and there are steps, and ideally there's been progress and we keep that moving forward. I think that's what we see with what's happening now too, with the systemic successes of the civil rights movement, now we see, you know, with Black Lives Matter, we see that the demands are higher and they're greater. And so people aren't saying, okay, should we be able to eat in the same restaurant together and use, you know, the same restroom? Obviously, those are basic things that we should be able to do. But now we're saying, I want to be treated like, you know, I'm a Black person, I want to be treated like you treat a white person. I want my hair to be viewed as beautiful as you view straight hair, you know. And so the demands, I think, are a little different. And then also the people, I think, involved in a lot of the contemporary movements are younger people, are queer people, are uneducated people, and I think our current movement is very inclusive and welcoming of those individuals that are still very needed because they contribute so much to this discussion. But I know we're running low on time, and I just want to say one other thing. So obviously the work that I do in Black Lives Matter focuses a lot on race and racism. But I think one thing that's really important, and as was mentioned earlier by other panel members, is that we do have to think holistically. We have to think about justice as social justice and think about social transformation, social revolution. And obviously race is a defining characteristic of our society. Racism is a defining characteristic of our society. But so is sexism, so is heteronormativity. We should be concerned about the natural environment, you know, more than we are. And so this intersectionality of issues, I think, is really critical moving forward as well.
I just want to say thank you. I'm sorry I had to run, but thank you all for letting me sit in this afternoon.
Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I just want to add a real piece on that. One of the things when I was asked to be a part of this panel, I kind of looked to see who was going to sit on the panel with me. So doing just a little bit of research, right? And to kind of answer Carletta's question, one of the good things that I saw about the panel was that we had somebody that was from the policy side, that understood the political arena. I'm not a politician, I don't understand that. I'm not trying to be a politician, but I learn from them, and I trust their judgment, because we share the same views and values. So we had a person there, we had a person also who is an advocacy piece. And that's another critical component of starting these movements. Now with myself, I consider myself as a servant. We can do all the lip service, we can go out here and chant and protest all these different things, but without the necessary or the needed services, there's not going to be any change. And that's kind of where we are as a state when I talk about mass incarceration, because we don't have the services. And they've cut all the services out within the Illinois Department of Corrections.
I wonder if the panel members could say anything specifically about your feelings or assessment of the county's formation of the Racial Justice Task Force. What do you think of it?
Oh my, you guys have another hour? Well, I've had kind of fluctuating feelings about it. So the proposal for the recommendation of the task force came out of the Community Justice Task Force that was established in 2012 or 2013. So it took 3 years for an actual task force to be created. And, you know, with a lot of dealings with the county board through bill programs, not jails, you know, there's a lot of resistance to even creating a racial justice task force, even with all of the boundless amounts of research on racial disparities in our county. So we ended up getting a very kind of watered down outline of the structure of what this task force would do. The intention was for the task force to focus on the criminal justice system in NCU. And then later on that was kind of morphed into housing and jobs and education and all these sorts of things to distract from the larger issue. But after attending last night's meeting, which was the first meeting of the Racial Justice Task Force, I was very inspired and hopeful about the work that this group could do. There really is a great group of people on that task force, students, you know, activists, academics, across the board, community members. And they, I mean, in the meeting last night, they set the direction, they set the tone. You know, they came in with one mission statement, left with another idea of what they wanted to do, came in with one structure, left with a different structure, replaced the chair of the task force in the meeting. So I'm pretty hopeful that perhaps something could happen there. But we can't, rely on the Racial Justice Task Force or the members of the Racial Justice Task Force who aren't being paid, volunteers only, no budget to this, by the way. We can't rely on them to solve all of the problems in Champaign Urbana. It still takes the work of all of us. It still takes involvement in the political structure. This is a multifaceted beast that we have to kind of attack at a lot of different angles.
Earlier, the role of the media was mentioned in sort of bringing awareness of things that Black communities have known for a long time, and the role of the media in showing that sort of to the rest of the world. I'm wondering if you recognize any tension in that aspect, as well as the fact that research suggests that the images of violence that we see of Black bodies tend to be a lot more graphic and a lot more intense than the images that we see of violence towards white and other bodies. I'm just wondering if you see any tension in that, or if in your view, just the awareness of getting people to sort of see this as a legitimate issue is enough.
I'm deeply disturbed by all of I'm grateful that we can record and we have access to these things now, because that's very important. But I do also see this, proliferation of all of these images of dead Black bodies. It reminds me of lynchings, basically. It's just a different form now. It's people laid out, shot down in the streets. So I find that very disturbing, and it's very kind of psychologically traumatizing as well, thinking in historical context. So I am kind of torn. I mean, there's a need for technology and the media and exposing and transmitting these issues, but at the same time, I don't think that it's helping with the image that's been constructed of Black people in this country, that they're criminal and aggressive, and it makes me think of Laquan McDonald as well as one example. What animal or human being would you need to shoot 16 times? It's just in a historical context, I just find it very problematic to see those images, even though they are needed in this conversation, in this movement.
The media, the images that we all see and different things like that, it's real. It can be problematic, but at the same time, it can be informative. And what I mean by that, there's a theory out there that talks about, I think it's called cultivation theory, that's in the media. But it just talks about the different dangers of what media and what people can see. So what I try to do with the young folks that I become engaged with is, we have discussions, we have talks about that. And we have to have honest dialogue, because the thing about it, when you get a impressionable mind, you need to get some input on how they feel and how they are thinking. And many times we suppress that communication. So my thing about when you do see images like that, and I have one daughter, and those are things that we have an honest discussion as a family about, because I do not want her to perpetuate or go to school or go into her settings with the wrong mindset or the wrong framework and just add to that negativity, because this is just all about educating our young people.
And the problem also with the media is that we see the same sort of images of Black people all the time, and so there's not adequate representation of the diversity of Black people and Black experience in the media. So there needs to be some media justice as well. And the exposure to the media that we have, the time that we consume, the hours in the day that we consume the media and all that, really is used in the way that we kind of view our world and constructing our worldview. And so that, is very problematic when we have those images of Black people. And then also, sorry, I keep talking, but also kind of thinking of death as a way of getting rid of people, and that also makes me think of mass incarceration, because that's what's happening. It's like the systemic erasure of a group of people, and it's done through mass incarceration, and it's done through literally killing, genocide.
I'd like to come back to a question that was posed earlier by the woman back here. And we've heard lots of very broad issues, problems, all of which are very important. The question was, what can you tell someone here today? And there is someone here today who has a question as to what can I do to change any of this? Something specific. It doesn't have to be something that's going to solve poverty in the nation or racism in the nation. she'd like to know, what can I leave here to think about, to engage myself, to deal with some of the issues that you've raised today. There are lots of organizations doing lots of dialogue, but the question was about action. Is there a specific action that you can relate to this generation now, especially, that would let them leave here and perhaps go out and make a change among the issues that you've so eloquently defined?
I always say that self-awareness, if you don't do anything else than raising awareness, this is something that you can do. So talking to other people, posting things, if you use the social media postings on Facebook, and counter narratives to the mainstream in particular, having difficult conversations, I think those are things that you could do every day, all day. But I do want to always also go back to activism in the local community, get involved in groups. With Build Programs Not Jails and the Black Lives Matter organization, we went to the county board and we pretty much forced them to create a racial justice task force. We did that. It took 3 years, they weren't doing anything. We went there, we had our signs, we were loud, we were disruptive, and we said, no, you need to do this, you need to do it now. And they did it. And it wasn't what we wanted, it wasn't some perfect thing that's going to solve all of our issues, but they did something. And so I can't stress enough that you actually you do have to get involved in these groups and go to meetings and figure out ways to incorporate yourself into the system. But at the very least, raising awareness of issues and presenting counter perspectives and radical thoughts.
So my answer to that question is, you have to understand, and you have to be willing to know people outside of whom you are. What I mean by that, you have to understand that there's differences in everybody, and you have to step outside of your comfort zone sometimes and have conversations, introduce yourself, talk about different things, ask questions about their family, do different things like that, because what that does is educates us all that there are differences in everyone. We cannot stereotype, we cannot have certain prejudices and different things like that, because that's where, as a young person, that's very problematic when I just want to hang with the same type of people and I don't understand the next person's or group of people. So that's kind of the things that when the young people I come in contact with, is just be open. Just have open discussion and conversation and never judge.
I know that the Racial Justice Task Force was recently created. Hi, sort of in an awkward position. So I'm wondering what sort of mechanisms has the task force thought of or put forward to sort of limit or eventually end this discriminatory policing that happens in our community specifically, and is restorative justice at all a part of the idea to sort of have community-based resolutions to conflicts where the victim is addressed and there's sort of a way to have accountability without bringing the police in?
Well, the first meeting was just last night, so they haven't done a whole lot yet, but there actually is one person on the panel who does work in restorative justice, and she spoke about that a few times last night, so I imagine that's going to be something that, a strategy or something that it's on her mind, a tool that she's taking into it. And as I said, they did kind of transition from this jobs, housing, education, multi-purpose model that was initially created to focus on the criminal justice system and policing specifically. So they did mention those things last night. So I think we just have to kind of wait and see what comes out of it.
We're going to take one more question besides this question, but I know that Evelyn has to get to an important holiday party with her kindergartner. But as I'm walking, I wonder if you all might want to mention one way in which folks in the audience could get involved in the work that you're doing, whether it's a meeting or an event coming up, that folks might want to come to before we take the last question. She's going to answer that question.
And we both have flyers here, maybe. I see some of the Black Lives Matter flyers. And so we have a Facebook page. We also have a Gmail address, blacklivesmattercu@gmail.com. We have a website now, a WordPress blog website. And then, you can contact me. I teach at Parkland Lodge as well, so that's another email address, but you can contact me today. and I can give you my personal email address. I guess those are some ways that you can get involved. And our chapter is open to membership, to anyone who wants to come and help and support this movement. So keep that in mind and spread the word that we are always wanting more people to get involved. And the work that we're doing, we work with, this year we're focusing on the community development aspect of things. So we're working at the Douglas Community Center with the After School program. We're working on creating free community classes like digital literacy classes, childbirth and pregnancy classes. We're also on the end of self-awareness and raising, we're working on podcasts, perhaps for web radio. And our website, I talked about that. We're working on a newsletter. So there's lots of different kind of things that we're doing. So if you do have an interest in graphic design or writing or art or spoken word or working with youth, any of those things, any skill that you have, I'm sure there's some place that could be used.
So I have James Kilgore somewhere in there, but there's a sign-up sheet for volunteers. We always have our doors open for volunteers because there's a lot of heavy lifting in the type of work that we do. So there's a sign-up sheet, and then also we have a web page, firstfollowersreentry.com. We have a web page up, and we are, let's see here, our email address. I have cards on me as well if you want to just come up and I can give you a card at the end. But I just want to keep everybody informed that in a month and a half, I guess, April 1st, that we'll have a 1-year anniversary on our program, on our project. And basically what we're going to do, we're inviting a group from Chicago called St. Leonard's, who run a reentry center that has been up and running for maybe 30 years now. They're going to come down and speak and talk to us a little bit about, some of the challenges, some of the best practices that they've had, and some of the successes and different things like that. So we're going to welcome them down, and then at the same time, we're going to have a dinner and just kind of a meet and greet type of deal and just celebrate our 1-year anniversary. Then we're also going to talk about the next phase of what First Follower has in store for the rest of the year. So James and I, we modeled some things after other reentry programs that's going on in the country. So that's going to be on April 1st at 6 o'clock from 6 to 8 p.m. That's a Friday. And we're going to be at 401 East Park Street, which is a Bethel AME Church. Once again, that's 601 East Park Street, 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock. And if you would like to sign up, there's a sign-up sheet. If you would like to ask more questions, I'm free to hang out for a while. So.
My name's Elizabeth Simpson. And just to add to that, first of all, I think it's important to join a group around these topics that is led by people of color, so do that first. But also there's a local chapter showing up for racial justice, which is specifically to try to support mobilizing white people. And that meets every Sunday at 5 o'clock. I'll put out a sign-up list if you want. But basically trying to help the accountability in between meetings, right? And help also with daily, like, the inverse of microaggressions, right? Like how do you counter the inherited patterns, right? The white supremacy. How do you encounter the internalized pieces? So we're going to have a reading group, reading a book called Witnessing Whiteness, which will start a week from Sunday. And then the alternating weeks are, again, personal accountability, helping each other think things through, making small choices that you're going to make in your life as a teacher, as a parent, whatever, and helping follow up on moving that forward. Thanks.
As Marlon said, if folks have questions and want to stick around, we're happy to do that. But let's thank our panelists for